Hey guys, I'm Artorigold, and today I'm going to do another Advance Wars by Web replay review. So if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to follow, subscribe, join my Discord server, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch. I stream pretty often. You can find all kind of updates on, why my videos are taking so long to release, things like that, and maybe some stupid One Piece related memes as well. So for in this match, let's go ahead and get into it. I am playing Drake. The enemy is Olaf. Now Drake is a weird commander. He's a Navy-based commander, or at least on paper, that's what he kind of was designed to be. But yet you can play him really well on maps that don't require any Navy fights at all. And a lot of the drawbacks of Drake are related to his air units. And you can kind of just avoid playing air units altogether on a lot of maps. So if you're new to the website, make sure to check this out. You can go to info, and then you can go to charts. And I have a bunch of them open already. We can show them off, right? It'll bring up this page. And here you can see all of the commanders, all of their abilities. If you have any questions on like you're a new player and you're wondering why the mechanic works that way, just check out any of this stuff on the charts. You can also find a tier list here so you can understand kind of how powerful your commander is and on what tier you're playing against. For example, I am playing on a Fog of War map. Tier 2 is Olaf, and Drake is considered tier 3, so he's a bit weaker. So Olaf does have the advantage here in this matchup. And here you can also find a pretty crazy chart where you can see just how much damage every single unit does to other units. You can also see things like this, where you can see how much ammo and vision they have, range, and even fuel, which is something that is kind of handy to know when you are playing as Drake. So let's go into what the commanders do. In Advance Wars by Web, Drake's passive, or day-to-day bonus, is his Navy units gain 1 movement, 25 defense, irrelevant because we are not on a map where that matters. And his air units lose 20% attack. This is pretty devastating, so you never really want to build air units. It's pretty inefficient as Drake. You could build a transport copter, but that's about it. Or maybe a black bomb, I guess, because, their attack doesn't matter. But in most games, that's like completely banned and not really an option. Now, the other big thing about him is that he is unaffected by rain, except for the vision. The vision still affects him, so if you use his superpower, which makes it rain for 1 day, you will get Fog of War. This isn't quite as relevant because we are on a Fog of War map already, so it's not that big of a deal. But if you were playing on a game that didn't have Fog of War at all, then this actually makes everything Fog of War for that day, which is kind of cool and interesting. But for the most part, people play Fog of War. It's a lot more fun, so that doesn't really come into play as much. Then, of course, you have the other thing, higher chance of rain and random weather, which obviously is something that doesn't happen in most games, random weather. Now, when you go to his power, global 1 HP damage with his little power and halves the fuel, which is pretty amazing. His superpower makes it 2 HP global, half the fuel, and then also, of course, adds the rain for 1 day, which makes him just have a little bit of a boost. And the half the fuel thing is really the big part that I really enjoy playing Drake for. Obviously, this is not very good against some commanders, such as Jess down here, who automatically resupplies all the fuel, so it doesn't matter. But against any other commander, it's a really fun mechanic, especially if you're playing against if you're playing on a very big map. Then they have to use a lot of movement, and that takes away a lot of the fuel even more. And then, of course, it'll half the fuel. So if you use your little power to half the fuel, and then you get another little power, you can half that fuel even more, which is pretty fun. I really enjoy it. It puts the enemy in kind of a weird spot where they have to build APC units in order to kind of survive. But you don't want to build too many APC units because that's a lot of money down the drain on units that don't really attack. 1, of course, is great. 2 is okay, but any more than that can be really excessive. So it's a pretty fun mechanic. And then, of course, one other big thing about Drake, and when it comes to the fuel, if you're playing on a map, it's pretty important because Advance Wars by Web loves to have maps like this one, where they give you a black boat starting out on like your HQ or something. There are so many maps out there like this. I recently played on a map as Drake, and my power, my half the fuel power, already wasn't very good on this map because it's a pretty small map, so there's not a whole lot of movement that's happening. But to make it worse, you have a black boat in the middle of the fight where you can go and just get your fuel back instantly, as well as 1 HP. So your power really, it didn't do anything. They didn't even need to build like any APC units against me. They just played around the black boat, and it was very, very hard to get Drake to work on a map like this. So if you are looking to play Drake, pick around the map. The map is pretty important. You want to play on a bigger map. If you can play on a Navy map, you know, that's great. Obviously, Drake is going to be good on that. But that's not really why I'm playing Drake. I'm playing Drake for the fuel loss, the global damage, and playing it on a ground map because I think he can work really well on them. So just make sure if there's any black boats on a map, maybe reconsider picking Drake. Because I've learned from experience, that black boat can basically cancel out the fuel aspect of your power. So let's get a little bit into Olaf, kind of a counterpart to Drake, whereas Drake does better in rain, Olaf does better in winter, and he changes it to snow instead of rain for one day. And just like him, just like Drake, global 2 HP damage on his superpower, and of course, he is unaffected by snow. And rain is basically like his version of snow, so they kind of have like a little yin and yang kind of counterpart to each other with that weather effect, which makes the matchup really fun in my opinion. His little power really sucks. It doesn't do global damage. It only does snow for one day, so you don't really want to use your little power as Olaf. The global power is just infinitely better. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the game. Go ahead and full screen it here. And so as you can tell, one of the big drawbacks to playing Drake is the air units, so I'm going to kind of never build an air unit. That's something that it's just a complete waste. And of course, as you can see, the beginning of the game is pretty standard. I'm going second, so I get a free infantry, and I am going to just do exactly what he's doing. Capture, capture, capture. That is the name of the game. Now, one thing that I guess is kind of to note here at the beginning of the game is I'm not going to build a recon. I have enough money for an infantry and a recon. There is basically there's like 3 different early game plays that people make. You can continue to just build infantry and capture more, but then you're kind of a little bit weaker in the early game. You can do a recon opening, which is great, which is what he does. Pretty standard, gets you vision, you can harass, you can see what the opponent is up to and where the main force is going to be moving, if that's even going to be a thing. Maybe it's all split on different fronts. Or you could do a tank opening, which is exactly what I will be doing. So you'll see here I will save my money, and I will be opening with a tank while he opens with a recon. Now, recon's probably a better way to open if you're newer to the game and you really don't know how to play around Fog of War. This is a bit riskier to open up with a tank, but I think with enough experience, it has more rewards. One big thing that I'd like to get into, as we're just kind of skipping through a bit of the capture game here, is the micro versus the macro. If you're not familiar with that, the micro are these small little trades in the game, and the macro is basically the big picture, the overall strategy of the game. And my overall strategy in this game is to build a lot of infantry up here to send them over to the north side of the map. I'm going to ignore the middle for the very beginning of the game, and I'm going to build most of my battle units and send them down here to the south. And I'm going to get my comm tower, not quite super early, but at a decent pace. You can kind of ignore the comm tower early in the game because it doesn't give you money. But if you are looking to fight in the early game, you do want to get that comm tower. And of course, if I'm doing a tank opening, I want to get that comm tower a little bit early. Not super early, I can wait a day, but I do want to get that comm tower. He waits a little too long for the comm tower and loses a bit of that bonus for it, but I get into a fight in the early game, and that comm tower is super, super extra handy for me because of that. So here is something I'd like to point out too. I don't like that he bought a mech unit this early. This was kind of a mistake. He should have just built an infantry. This mech unit takes forever to get anywhere or do anything. And if I can remember right, I believe this mech unit does literally nothing. It dies as soon as it sees action, but this could have just been an infantry moving along, and it would have had infinitely more value. It's not that big of a deal, but I think if you buy a mech early in the game, it's generally not that great. Mechs take way too long to get into the action. If you are going to build a mech unit, I do, however, think it would be better used on this factory, because as you'll notice, there is a river here, and rivers you can travel through, but it's pretty slow. But mech units are not hindered by mountains. Like, they basically have the same movement speed no matter what terrain it is. So it's kind of nice to build a mech unit here, but he really wanted that mech unit, and he really wanted to send it down here, and it just didn't have any value, and I don't really approve of it. So as you can see, I do get a recon after my tank. That's something that I kind of... recons are always good, but I wasn't getting the recon for harassing. So I just waited on it, I sat on it, and I just kind of put everything in forests in order to hide them. And I build more tanks down here because I am focusing more of my battle units down here. I do get some in the north eventually, but I want to show all of my units down here. I think show is a keyword in Fog of War maps. Basically, it's like showing your hand, but you show your forces, you show where they are on the map, and then from that, you can kind of assume that you're weaker on a different side of the map because of it. So here he's scouting on the north side, and this is kind of one of the things there's a mirror, right? His comm tower is closer to him on this side, similar to how it is on this side. So he kind of focuses more on this side while I focus on the opposite. And that's kind of a trend with a lot of the maps. I really like that. He decides to get an artillery. His artillery, I don't agree with it. He had money for a tank. I think he should have gotten a tank. But here, I'm going to get my comm tower and capture it before him. One big thing to note, of course, I'm going second. So me capturing this comm tower is a sign that he is not looking to battle. But I am, because I have my tank, and it's closing in on this area, which is where we will eventually meet. And I am trying to get through this game a little bit quicker and be a little bit more straightforward. Maybe you can tell. Yeah, I read comments, and I saw that on my other videos, people weren't happy that they were 2 hours long. So I'm trying to be a little bit quicker and not over-explain as much. If you prefer me to slow down and you like me over-explaining things, then by all means let me know in the comments, but I'm going to try doing it a little bit quicker this time around. So here he is moving his mech unit, and obviously I think what he should have built instead was an infantry. And instead of building that artillery, he had enough money for a tank, and I think that's what he should have gotten as well. If you had a transport unit like an APC, he does get one later, and I do think APC units are really good, especially against a Drake player, because you can refuel, which is something that I think is really good if you're planning ahead against a Drake player, by the way. Get an APC probably early on, and then your mech unit becomes a lot more worthwhile. But he doesn't really do that. And so I think that if you're going to build a mech unit, build it a little bit later after you have an APC for it. And as you can see, artillery units also have very poor movement, just like mechs do. Tanks have way more. So if you're trying to be aggressive in the early game, I think a tank is better for establishing yourself and getting the properties. Whereas artillery is better for when you have a choke point and a lot of units kind of built up in one area, and then you can kind of defend the artillery in a better spot that way. So I don't agree with that. Tanks are probably better. As you can see, we finally see the APC unit that I was talking about. I do think that was a good move. I think that he should have gotten an APC over the mech unit, and the battlecopter is something that he built a lot of. And I think a lot of people build battlecopters, and I don't think that was the right play for him. Because he's playing against Drake, and one of the big weaknesses of air units is the fuel. You'll notice the fuel consumption on an air unit is crazy, and as soon as you half that, it is pretty devastating for them. But he does have the APC unit, so of course, in his mind, he's probably thinking it'll be okay. But he does spam a lot of air units, and I do get quite a bit of anti-air through this game, and you'll kind of notice that. However, one mistake that I made, I think if I were to turn back time, I would have bought an anti-air unit a little bit sooner. So here, he has his tank hidden in a pretty great spot, and so I show, in other words, I attack first. And while this normally is a bad play to show like this, because I have a second tank in the area, I should be able to trade on him with these 2 tanks when he goes on there. So I feel pretty safe about this. Now, the way this could have been bad for me, not as bad, but it could have been bad for me, is you see, if he attacks here, he falls right into my trap, which he does, obviously. But if he were to have his tank more down here and attack me from the left, then my tank, I would have to retreat this tank and then move my fresh tank to attack him. So the trade would still be good for me, but it would be a little inefficient. And we'll get into that. You'll see what I'm talking about here. We'll go through my infantry movement turns. Nothing too crazy going on here. I'm building a lot of infantry on this base and then sending them to the middle and then just kind of going through that river. And then, of course, I am sending 1 tank up to the top lane just to protect my properties. I'm not necessarily using this tank to engage and be aggressive and push. I am doing it to defend, while most of my battle units are here. But it's good to just kind of safeguard the top with 1 tank. I feel a little bit safer. And I'm going to build an artillery because I have a lot of infantry and I'm just defending. I think an artillery is the better play. If you're attacking, you want to send more tanks and direct combat units. If you're defending, the ranged units are going to be better. So here you're going to see he's finally starting to get the comm tower. This is another reason why getting this comm tower a little bit early is great, and you'll see it in this trade especially allows me to take out this tank and this infantry unit, where if I didn't have this comm tower, I'm not so sure that would have happened. And he is going first, so not getting that comm tower, waiting so long to get it, is a pretty bad mistake. He should have gotten this a day earlier, especially because he is now going to attack with this tank here. Eventually, we'll see when he does it. He moves it off that property, and here he attacks with this tank, and he would have been able to do probably 1 to 2 more damage with that comm tower. Taking that guy here was a really weird move. If I were him, I would have taken that infantry off the property and put it in that forest, or maybe moved it back to the city, or maybe moved it to the left, right here, so you would have been able to see if there was something in that forest. Moving it here served pretty much no purpose. So that comm tower, as you can see, the trade would have been better. Him moving that infantry off the city was good, so he could attack on the city for the extra defense. I did really like that play, though. But he could have microed a little bit better there, I think. He could have revealed the forest, etc. So here he has the artillery, the APC unit, and the mech finally getting a little bit of movement in, but it's just a turn too late, just like it's a turn too late on the comm tower. And he does have the battlecopter, which is a little bit devastating because I'm pretty deep into his territory, and it's going to take me longer to get an anti-air to deal with it. So his battlecopter is going to do a lot of damage here. But as we can see, I'm going to get some really good trades here in the bot side. I do some capturing, I do a little bit of movement, a little bit of capturing. One of the habits that I think is really good to get into is to try to capture every property first. And then do your movement and attacks. Capture first, movement and attacks afterwards. So you can see what you're dealing with. So here I get the comm tower attack. Even though he's on a city, the comm tower attack bonus is really great. And then I'm able to finish it off here with my tank. So even though I showed first, because I have more tanks in the area, it was pretty devastating. Now, one thing that also hurt him here is that mech unit and that artillery. Like I said before, he could have built a tank instead of that artillery, and then he could have had a second tank right here for these follow-up trades. He still would have had worse trades, however, because he didn't have the comm tower, but you can see how buying this artillery was a bit devastating for him, including the mech unit. The mech unit is nowhere near. If he had the APC unit sooner, then maybe the mech unit could help with these trades against this. If he had the comm tower sooner, he would have been able to do more damage, and maybe his tank wouldn't have fully died there, and he could have retreated it. And of course, like I've said before, just not very good purchases. He had the money to buy the tank. He had 2,000. He had 2,000 extra. He was at 8,000 and bought an artillery instead of a tank. So overall, these small little decisions that you make might not seem like they make a big difference, but overall, this skirmish, I overwhelmingly won it, and it could have been very different if he bought different units instead. So, something to keep in mind, I'm going to use my recon, of course. Instead of hiding, I'm just going to try to capture and harass, or prevent his capture, rather. We are going to move all of our units in the north. I am playing pretty safe and defensively. I'm going to go for the mountain properties. And we are building another tank. And here I'm going to build an artillery to get it moving, because I already have 4 tanks now. So we're going to get an indirect. We have a lot of infantry. And I'm going to continue pushing all of my battle forces down south. But what will end up happening is his air units will end up arriving. And he makes a little bit of a mistake with it. Nothing that big, though. But the main part of it, see, I wouldn't have done that play. That's just a suicide play. Moving that infantry forward to that forest was ambitious. I like it, but it didn't pay off for him. Hiding your infantry in the forests is always really good. You know, it was a risk. He took that risk. I probably would have done a risk pretty similar. And here he builds more tanks, which is something that he should have done a little bit earlier. That's all right. And here what you'll see is I'll try to get his, get these, he basically just sacrifices these infantry, which I don't really agree with. When it comes to the infantry game, I definitely beat him. I have 16 infantry to his 13, and these 2 are as good as dead, including this one. One thing is, if you have a weak infantry, you put them in forests and just kind of use them as bait, but this is just throwing them away, and that's not very good. You can instead try to use them for a trap play, which I think would have been way better. So here we find his recon, and that 1 tank I built is getting rid of it. And one of the things I noticed at this point is, even though he should have a good amount of forces up here in the north, he doesn't. And all of my aggression down on the bot side of the map and my showing means that he's probably going to move most of his forces down here to try to counteract me. Which means I'm going to just sit here and take the north for free. And what I'm going to end up doing is retreating and head towards the mid instead of continuing to fight over these properties. Because at this point, I basically stopped him from getting free money, right? Like, he should have been able to get those properties, but because of those really bad trades that he made, now I'm getting all of his infantry for free and retreating at the same time, which is a double win. I was going to retreat with these tanks anyways, but now I can retreat and get some kills for free. So he really screwed up with that. And he doesn't have vision anymore as well. He does have a recon on the way, though, but he built too many recons. I think he built like 3 recons or something like that. Something like that. It's a lot of money to waste on recons. Recons are great for vision, but you don't want too many of them. So here, again, I'm going to continue building more tanks and send them to the south. But then after I see his battlecopter, I end up backing off and going towards the mid, which we should see relatively soon. I believe we see the mistake he makes with his battlecopter. Yeah, right here. So he puts the battlecopter in the forest, which does not hide it. But he does have really good protection for his artillery here. But I don't have any anti-air to deal with it. That's another mistake I make, by the way. I should have built an anti-air. I should have predicted something I just always see on ladder. Players love building battlecopters. In fact, they love spamming it. I should have built anti-air a lot sooner. So that was a big mistake that I made. Probably one of the biggest is not having anti-air out. I should have had one by now. Day 11 and I don't have an anti-air against a random player. I should have had one much earlier. So here we have so much of our infantry that have been uncontested and got all these properties. And now I'm going to move all of them together at once and try to take out his infantry. Which works really well, because in the infantry game, I'm definitely winning. He threw away so much of his infantry. He has 9 to my 17. He just sacrificed them needlessly. Which was something, I mean, infantry are expendable, but when it gets to the late game, you don't really want to build a bunch of infantry. You want to build battle units. So losing a lot of infantry in the early game has a pretty negative effect. They also are great as basically recon and vision units. I take that out and it's a little glitchy there, but I am slowly pushing all of my units together so we can trade and attack 2 attacks on the same unit, which is a lot better than just taking a single trade or sacrificing an infantry out randomly in the open. So here he uses a mech unit and it's just capturing, like that's the only value it has. And here, he keeps sacrificing his infantry. You'll see he'll continue pushing them forward, but there's no reason for him to do so, especially if he could have just retreated and tried to trap, and like the forests right here would have been good, or a forest right here would have been good. I don't really understand what he was thinking by moving those forward. And here, he has nothing but infantry, and I can tell, so I'm just going to continue taking these out with my tank, and his tanks are actually going to be pushing towards all of my infantry in the middle that are clumped up, when he should have pushed it in the north. But, you know, with the vision game, you don't really know these things necessarily. I do like these trades. Obviously, a battlecopter here is going to hit me pretty hard, and his recon stops my capture, which is really good. His artillery, however, I think it's pretty useless. Artilleries in a forest are pretty good if you're overextending into an enemy territory and try to capturing their properties. The artillery is great at stopping that, but I'm not overextending. As you can tell, I'm already retreating, and you'll see, as I see this battlecopter, I'll take out this recon, but for the most part, I'm retreating and going towards the middle where all my infantry are so I can have better trades. If I decided to push down south, that would have been a big mistake, and this artillery, that's classic overextending. The mech unit and artillery and battlecopter are not things that I want to fight into until I have an anti-air, which I did buy one, by the way. I forgot to mention that. But because my anti-air isn't there, I know there's a battlecopter, I'm retreating down south, because although I'm retreating in this area, he still doesn't have the properties. And you'll notice I'm at 20,000 while he's at 17. So I'm at a pretty big eco advantage because he doesn't have any of that stuff. His money, the longer the game goes on, the better for me at this point. And I'm just delaying it. I'm going to try to capture this property, but I don't really do too much about those. I kind of ignore those. And I push middle over here, because I know that most of his battle forces are going to be down here. If his battlecopter's down here, I can assume that more is coming. So I am just taking kind of a mind game assumption here that his north side is going to be relatively weak. But something that reinforces that idea is that my tank over here has been largely uncontested. So here I'm going to move and start building some battle units and move them over here towards the north and middle, and I'm going to start falling back on the south. And I'm going to move my artillery where all my clumped units are. I'm going to heal. 4 HP is pretty good. And as you can see, I'm going to move all of my tanks kind of together at once. Taking away his recon is really, really good because I'm able to attack from the forest, which means his battlecopter won't see me. And of course, attacking from a forest here and attacking on a city here is just free. I continue to fall back. My 1 HP recon still has really good value. He's most likely going to die, but I think it's worth the risk because, you know, he's 1 HP. And here we're just going to slowly take away all of these properties with my infantry and my tank, and he really doesn't do anything with it. However, one of the biggest scares, as you can see, is he is mass producing battlecopters. But the fuel really hurts them a lot. And one of the other mistakes that he makes here is his APC unit is nowhere near all of these battlecopters that he basically sends towards the middle. If he had an APC unit towards the middle to help his battlecopters out, he would have been at a lot better state for the micro game. And here, as you can see with my 20,000, I am able to continue buying a lot. I buy a medium take and an anti-air. So you can see that my small little advantages in the early game are really starting to pay off. And at this point, buying multiple anti-airs, I should have bought more and I should have had some early. I know I've said that a lot, but I really feel like that's something that you guys should also do. Buying a preemptive anti-air, I think, is so important. And I just waited a turn on it. Waiting 1 day extra, I mean, we've already gone over how devastating his comm tower, his 1 day on that comm tower also hurt him a lot. Same can be said about waiting 1 day for an anti-air. It can make all the difference. Him having that 1 day with a tank instead of an artillery would have made all the difference. So yeah, I think that it's important to reiterate that. So here, this was a really ballsy move for him. I mean, I understand that I'm capturing it, so he doesn't want to get the property, but he does sacrifice a 7,000 unit. Maybe he felt safer because he had the battlecopter in the region, but he should know I have so many tanks here that this is going to be basically gone. This is a little unfortunate, though, because he is able to, with that trade, see my recon. This battlecopter gets some pretty good value here. He moves up his artillery because he feels pretty safe, and he can finally start capturing some of these properties. I don't really understand why he moved his APC unit here, though. If I were him, I would have tried to move the APC unit, try to get some more infantry, or, you know, something like along those lines at that point. That turn was pretty bad, but I mean, that's kind of what happens. If you just mass spam battlecopters, you don't really get many ground units besides infantry. You just don't have the money, especially when you're down by 3,000. So here I'm going to push forward to the middle. I see that tank there. Kill that outright. You always want to keep your tanks. If you have 2 tanks, you want to keep the 2 tanks together. You don't want to really like split them up, because if the enemy has a tank, you can just take it right out with 2 tanks and not take too much damage. And at this point, we're getting all of the infantry off these properties, which makes me feel pretty safe about these properties up here. Even if I were to lose my tank, he doesn't have nearly as much infantry power to capture and take those properties from me. And here, as you can see, my eco difference has a massive, massive play here because I'm getting the medium tanks out. And like I said before, I'm able to get these 2 tanks and 1 on the city, so I get the extra defense. And I'm going to just take the really good trades here to take those guys out and weaken them. And then I'm going to move my artillery forward, so even if his battlecopter does take some hits and do damage to me, my anti-air is now in the area to be able to full kill that. So it might seem a little too aggressive at first, but by splitting up my damage, it actually is really helpful. So like, I could have taken both of these tanks, and I could have outright killed one of them, but it's better to split the damage here because now they do less damage. And plus, they have a city for defense, and if they try to go for me, they're going to get punished by my artillery as well. So splitting the damage is better when you're expecting return fire in some cases, because the return fire will not hit you so hard. And I'm just trying to bait this battlecopter in of this anti-air. And we're going to continue moving more anti-air. And here, since I have so many forces in the middle, you can see I'm actually going to make a play for his HQ. And this is going to put a lot of pressure on these units because I know he has a lot of battle forces down here. He doesn't have much up here except for like a tank. And I have a lot of vision. Like, look how much vision I have. I know his units could be around here somewhere, maybe in the forests, but I have so much infantry here that they're expendable, and I'm looking to just make really good trades. He has to do something about this HQ. Sure, it's going to be a 3-turn capture, not 2, but he still has to apply pressure and get him off of it, because my infantry can capture and then rejoin if he doesn't full kill them. And I have 2 tanks and an artillery blocked and surrounded by infantry, so it's a pretty good setup. It's a pretty good setup to get some good, to bait out some of his battle units and then get attacks on him. Of course, the downside to this is that they're going to be battlecopters, and I'm not going to get very good trades against those. So with his turn, he's going to try and move his battlecopters now towards the middle. I wasn't quite aware of how many battlecopters he had. I felt pretty confident with the 2 anti-air that I had, but I should have gotten 3. Here he gets me off the property. The battlecopter did a lot of work, and he's going to get a really nice trade there for me. Luckily, I do have a tank kind of in the area. And here we can see he does do damage to me. But because I'm on that city, I'm not taking nearly as much damage, so I'm able to get a nice return fire. And my anti-air and my artillery is also in the area to get some hits here. It's kind of like chess. You want to sacrifice your pawns, but make sure you take a knight or a rook when you do it. You know what I mean? So here we're going to see we're getting really close to our superpowers as well, and something pretty big happens. I'm going to use my superpower. Of course, obviously, he doesn't even go for my HQ yet because he thinks, oh, I have a turn. But because of this, I'm still able to get a really good attack in. Any artillery attack on a tank is so big value. And I, of course, get 2 artillery attacks on tanks. One finishes one off, one does like 7 damage or whatever. Really big value for me. And they're in the forest, so they're still really well protected. I'm just going to sacrifice this guy. We're just trying to get my superpower ready to go. And I'm going to get the anti-air in range of that. Even if my anti-air now dies, 8,000 anti-air, completely killing the 9,000 battlecopter, well worth the trade. And also I have tank and artillery protecting him, so even if he goes for it, I got counter trades and another anti-air in the area. So I did some, you know, pretty major sacrifices here, but he's getting punished harder than I am because I have more units in the area and a superpower right around the corner. And I have medium tanks coming, and at this point I know he has his power, so I'm trying to put like my medium tank on a city as opposed to like getting an extra space of movement there, because I'd rather have a full HP medium tank than an 8 HP one once he uses his superpower. And here I'm putting a lot of pressure, and I'm actually thinking, wow, he's not going for my guy on the HQ at all. I'm actually just going to try to surround him and see if I can actually get this HQ capture off. As you can see, I'm killing his infantry, I'm blocking the HQ. Unfortunately, he's going to get to me, you know, over here. There's not really anything I could do. This guy needed to go here to block him. Air units just have so much more movement. But when he does this play, he's also walking right into the range of my anti-air. So while I am sacrificing maybe what could have been a free win, actually I don't think there was a way for me to make that capture. Now that I think about it, the copter just has so much more movement. But the upside to it is I do take out the battlecopter for free with an anti-air because that's in perfect range. Unless his tank goes for me, I think my anti-air lives, has low HP, but still gets a favorable trade on the battlecopter with my superpower. I believe that's what's happening. I did watch the replay over a couple times before doing this video. So we get some good trades against the tank. We're just going for it, even though the battlecopter is going to do a lot of damage to us. We want to make sure that his tank is out of the way and distract him so we can maybe get a capture here. So here his superpower is extremely OP, and this is why Olaf is tier 2. Global damage is OP, and the weather effects is really, really good. And here he's getting 0 value from this APC unit, puts the mech in the APC unit, whatever. The superpower is now coming from my end, so the fuel is going to really be devastating for a lot of these air units that he has, because they've been around and they've been moving around a lot. So they're going to have some fuel missing already. And here at this point, I actually back off the middle after I see a lot of his air units. And I try to regroup around my medium tanks, because I took a lot of sacrifice damage here. His superpower was really good. Olaf's superpower is just, it's the reason why the character is so busted. But luckily, as Drake, your superpower removes the snow instantly. So it's not as devastating as it normally would. But one big aspect of that, of course, is that it can be reverse Uno. He can do the same thing to you. So here my artillery gets a great trade. I'm able to finish it off. And here I go for the artillery, get a little bit of vision on that as well. And now big boy medium tanks and anti-air are on the way. And what I'm trying to do here is, while my HQ capture didn't work and I see all the battlecopters, I'm actually falling back a little bit, and I'm going to try to make these forces all group up so we can all attack together at once. That's a big thing in Advance Wars. You don't want to split up your army too much. That's something that happens. Sometimes it's better to not go for the trades and just group up and then attack together all at once instead. So here I'm moving my infantry forward, but they're going in forests, trying to get a trap as I try to regroup everything, and I move my tanks and everything more towards all of my other units. As you can see, we want to keep them all grouped together, so my artillery can either trap or block, etc., and we build some more anti-air. As you can see, I built an anti-air up north. That's going to help me, and we need more anti-air because he took one out, and I just know from all these battlecopters that he is spamming ever-living fuck out of them. And I refuse to buy battlecopters as Drake. It's just inefficient. Although they could have favorable defensive capabilities against tanks themselves, I'd rather just build tanks to kill the enemy tanks instead. So the rain is over. Got a bit of a glitch here, but I am capturing that city. Anti-air, while they do insane damage against infantry, that's another reason why a preemptive one is really good, because even if they don't have battlecopters and they're not showing it, you can also use them to destroy infantry relatively quickly. So here my anti-air is doing a lot of damage. I'm moving, I got my heals off of my medium tank. They are ready to do a lot of damage. I do believe I get a Neo tank, but not quite yet. I do have a good amount of money. But here we are grouping up all of our forces, and we are going to push together all at once. That's something you should always try to look to do in Advance Wars. That is going to make you do way, way better trades in the future, especially if you have artillery and you can kind of move with an artillery and protect them. Yeah, I have medium tanks. For some reason, the glitch showed Neo tanks. Neo tanks do come later because, as you can see, I am getting quite a bit of an economy bonus here. I'm at 23,000 to his 16. Fair enough. I would say at this point, it's pretty much guaranteed that I win. The superpower play that I had was really devastating to him. And my medium tanks are basically almost in the fight, and I'm grouping them together with my small tanks. So that is going to do a heavy amount of damage. And at the same time, I also have anti-air that are ready to take out all of these battlecopters. And as you can see, they don't have a lot of fuel. 27, 28, you know. The new ones he built do, but 37. And one of the things that I think could have helped him in this game is this APC unit who's just lost in the woods in the middle of nowhere. And instead, having the APC unit moving with all of his battlecopters would have been a way better play for him. But instead, he takes this mech unit and APC unit, which, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 money, by the way, could have been a tank. And he captures one property with it, and he tries to go for this one, and I'm pretty sure my anti-air takes care of it. So this is just 8,000 gold that just doesn't have, like, any value. This mech unit was completely pointless. It could have just been an infantry, save a little bit of money, probably would have done more with it. The APC unit, while a good purchase, he used it in a very wrong way. He should have used it with the battlecopters. And here, unfortunately, his battlecopter gets into a trap. This is how you use a 1 HP tank, by the way, perfectly. Put it in a forest, any 1 HP unit, if you're not willing to heal it. And here he builds an APC unit because he's worried about the fuel, but it could have been just that APC unit, which is what he should have done, obviously. I'm sorry for repeating myself. I know you guys don't like that. But sometimes reiteration is important so you don't make the same mistake. So, of course, his trap on that battlecopter was devastating for him, so I'm able to kill that, and his mech unit that he built so early has just 0 value. It captured like 1 property, but that was nothing that an infantry couldn't have already done. And that APC unit is just lost, and it's stuck, and it's this is like Saving Private Ryan. He's behind enemy lines, like he's screwed, right? And here we show the medium tank, which is good. I think showing the medium tank is fine because we are moving together, and I'm trying to move it in a way where I can get into the forests when possible, and also have an artillery right behind him. So even if he does have a big unit of his own, my artillery can counter trade his first attack. So like if, for example, he had a medium tank to attack my medium tank on the HQ, my artillery would have had a trade, and then my counter trade with both medium tanks, etc., etc. That's kind of how moving together works. So when the pawn moves in, you take his pawn back and then try to take a rook or a bishop back. That's kind of how Advance Wars is played. If you're trying to get like really nice wins, that's the best way to play the game. You don't want to split your forces up. Keep them together. That's the best way to win all your Advance Wars games. This can, of course, apply a little bit differently when you're playing on a much bigger map. On a map like this, you know. So here comes the Neo tank that was spoiled a little bit earlier from the visual glitch, or whatever that was, a bug, who knows. The weather effects, I think, looked like it had something to do with it. And then, of course, you can see my anti-air is now finally in the area to take out these battlecopters, and because they're missing so much fuel, they really can't retreat. And I'm also pretty deep into this comm tower, which will also be a really nice thing to have for these trades with my anti-air and medium tanks and artillery and my battle advantage. I mean, I have so many more units than him. And of course, with every turn pumping out like a Neo tank or a medium tank, it's pretty much game over for him at this point. But in a Fog of War game, you don't always know that because you don't have the information. He has no idea that there's, you know, Neo tanks coming for him. And here his battlecopter takes a trade onto my medium tank, but as you can see, medium tanks are pretty hefty. They don't really take that much damage. I am really sad about this though. My anti-air is on the city. It does take a lot of damage, and I'm really sad about that because I really want the anti-air. Biggest mistake I made this game, not enough anti-air, and not early enough. But because I have the medium tanks in the area, I'm basically able to overpower him. And because I know he doesn't have any units in this area, and he hasn't captured them yet, I'm going to send these infantry to take these properties away from him, from this tiny little bit of a force here. Because I know he doesn't have anything. Most of his units are in this area, I can tell. You can tell a little bit easier once it's my turn, because we can see what my vision looks like. And we can tell that all of his battlecopters and tanks are right here. And this is where his focus is. It's where my main battle force is. So I know that me having an extra tank and 2 anti-air, and even a low HP tank in the area, and with a medium tank on the way and a neo tank on the way, what I'm able to do here is start applying pressure and capturing and move these guys forward. And I basically split the difference by moving to these 2 areas, meaning I could either push more forward to the middle if I need to, or push more to the south if I need to. I give myself that movement option. That's what's great about these reinforcements. That trap was really good, but not worth buying a mech for. And at this point, I'm just using my little power because I just want to half the fuel on his battlecopters that are already low. Because I saw they were at like 20 whatever, and now they're at 10. And the only APC unit he had, I like just killed it just a little bit ago. I didn't know about this APC unit. But either way, that's 10,000 gold he spends on an APC unit. That's a lot of money. 10,000 for 2 APC, like no battle units? It's a lot of money. That's a lot of money you have to be using just because of Drake's power. And I think that's really why I think Drake is so good against air units especially. Because you don't really care about the air units as much, because you can force their movement and make them die to fuel, or make him, you know, waste a ton of money buying support units like black boats and APC units. And here I'm just gonna keep attacking with like medium tanks and infantry, because I'm pretty safe and secure knowing that I have a big unit and eco advantage right now, because I haven't seen any medium tanks. I've just seen nothing but battlecopters. So I'm pretty sure that he's just going to continue buying battlecopters. So I'm going to, of course, make some more anti-air purchases just to try and help reinforce the ones that I've lost so far. And at this point, the game's pretty much sealed the deal. He did resupply, but look, he's got 7 fuel left on these battlecopters. So now he's at a point where he has to either retreat with them or sacrifice them. And sacrificing them or joining them is basically the only plays that really make sense here. Because I have anti-air in the area that are going to kill him otherwise. So he makes some unfavorable trades and kind of forces the fights with the battlecopters because of the fuel putting a lot of pressure on him. And that's what I really enjoy the most about playing as Drake. But of course, one other thing I'd like to reiterate, sorry for people who don't like when I repeat myself, but if you are playing on a map that has a lot of black boats at the very beginning of the game, that's when you're going to see Drake do basically nothing. And Drake kind of sucks on those maps especially. I think Drake goes from like a tier 3 hero automatically to a tier 4 hero if you play against a smart opponent. Like a smart flak player can beat a Drake easily if that map especially just has like a starting black boat on it or whatever. So here I'm even going to trade against them and surround them with my little tanks. And this poor battlecopter, 1 HP, 1 shot. He's got nothing. He's surrounded. And I'm going to just keep applying pressure as quickly as I can here, because I'm pretty sure I have the win in, especially now that I have 2 Neo tanks on the way. So basically the big things that you can take from this fight, the one big thing that he does at this point in the game that I did really want to applaud, and I don't think does he do it this turn? He might. He ends up building a rocket unit right here on this base, and I think it might be this turn. And it was actually a really good idea, because I have a bunch of medium tanks in the area. Yeah, it was. This was actually a really good buy. I really applaud him buying this rocket here. That was super smart. I believe I had vision of it though. So I do really applaud that use of a rocket from him, because I believe he has to, I think he moves it back though, so he can build a unit so he doesn't take a shot with it right away. But at this point, I'm continuing my pressure while he's focusing a lot of the fights down here in the mid. I'm capturing the properties. Capturing that. Just captured that. I have both comm towers. I mean, his fate is kind of sealed. 14,000 to 27,000. So I'm just going to try to play through the game pretty quickly at this point, because I know that we want to get through these games a little bit quicker, and I want to keep this under an hour. So we're going to go ahead and we can just kind of see how the game plays out. But as you can imagine, with a bunch of medium tanks and neo tanks, at this point I can basically brute force my way through to the victory of the game. And he just kind of gets like slowly and painfully brute forced through. And he continues to buy battlecopters, which I really disagree with, by the way. I don't know why people on... I feel like that's a big trend. A lot of players really... It seems like they overvalue battlecopters, doesn't it? I see so many people who do that. So here I'm moving all my forces and grouping them together. As you can see, I'm not like going super hard into the HQ because I saw the rocket. And instead, I'm just trying to regroup my forces, especially with my Neo tank on the way. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to focus my units over here, force myself through this little bridge to get to the rocket. That was my game plan. I ignored the HQ, and instead I was going to move all my units together, get rid of the rocket. We do take a lot of damage here, but I have more anti-air on the way, including more Neo tanks. I have 3 Neo tanks now. I mean, it's just game over. So yeah, some of the things to really talk about with this game, a lot of minor early game mistakes the enemy used, and that's a really devastating thing, and I think people don't realize just how much of a difference, like, buying a mech and an APC unit can, like, hurt you in the early game compared to buying just an infantry or a tank instead of an artillery. He also built too many recons in the early game as well, which I thought was a pretty bad mistake. And then, of course, building too many battlecopters was also really a downfall. As cool as battlecopters are, guys, they die instantly from an anti-air, and anti-air are cheaper. So I just don't value battlecopters to be that great of units. So I really don't think that you guys should, I mean, just learn from these mistakes is, I guess, what I'm trying to point out here. Move all your units together so you can trade together. Sacrifice infantry as pawns so you can then take out their bigger units. Work together as a team. All of your units lumped up together to make attacks all at once is going to easily overpower the enemy and brute force your way through. And don't sacrifice your infantry too needlessly. He sacrificed a lot of infantry. He only has 3. I have 17. Maybe it doesn't matter because it's this point. He loses. I capture the HQ. I believe he surrenders, but yeah, the game's over here. He makes like 1 attack on his rocket on my Neo tank when he should have used it on the HQ, and then he resigned. So yeah, final thoughts on this game. In the early game, make sure to focus on building infantry. The mech units are not going to do anything. They are really good against tanks, but you want to build infantry instead. They're way cheaper, they have more movement, it helps you capture the properties in the early game, and that's a big focus. That's the name of the game. Getting that eco advantage and property advantage is way too important to give up. A mech unit is not worth it. That 2,000 gold can mean the difference between buying a tank or not. So yeah, I just don't think it's worth it. If you buy an APC unit early on, that's fine. I think that's great, especially for the property game. And then later you can build the mech units instead of a tank and just transport them with your APC unit. He did neither of those things, and that was pretty devastating, and he lost the property game. He lost a lot of momentum from that, and doubly because I'm Drake and taking away the fuel of his units, it's putting a lot of pressure on him. That APC unit could have been helping out his air units, blocking for them. So if you make a trade with a battlecopter, what you could do is you could attack with the battlecopter. Let's say you kill a unit with a battlecopter, right? You move your battlecopter forward, attack and kill a unit. Then you can take that APC unit, put it in front of the battlecopter to block any incoming attacks from an anti-air, refuel, and then move the battlecopter somewhere else. And it's way too hard, and you don't want to attack an APC unit, really. So that's a great way to use the APC units. That's how you should use them if you are building a lot of battlecopters. Another big point of thing here is don't build so many battlecopters. They're good, but they're not that good. They die way too easily from an anti-air. And some of the mistakes also, he captured the comm tower too late. That could have helped him out a lot more on some of those early game trades. And also, my mistakes, I should have built an anti-air much earlier as well. That was a big thing for me. Buying an anti-air preemptively can go a long way, a very long way, because even if they don't build air units, you can still get a lot of value on them because they do make relatively good trades. One of the big things here, we'll look at the charts actually. If you look at an anti-air, they do really good damage. They can do 50 to an artillery. Obviously, they do really well against the infantry and mech units. They do really decently. They can defeat recons, they can take out ranged units, and they do 25 against it. They can even finish off a tank, potentially. So anti-air units, while they're most efficient against air units, they have some pretty good value, pretty good damage against other things. And maybe the opponent built an anti-air, and you can just take that out and trade with that. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. That is the end of this video. Hopefully you guys liked it. Make sure to follow me on Twitch, on Twitter, join my Discord server, like and subscribe the video, and all that. And hopefully I have some more videos on the way. Thanks so much for watching. You all have a good one. Peace.